This is Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Oh, not so bad yourself?
Good. You have any idea what I'm going to hit you with today?
I have no idea. I never know. The first 2 minutes is usually me just reacting to whatever is in that brain of yours.
Okay. So we keep getting, I shouldn't say we, I keep getting messages from listeners who say, will you guys be at the RSA Conference? And I've been on your case about this for 2 years. I think we should try to make the effort to go, but I think you feel like it's not effort well placed. Explain yourself.
Explain. All right. I just think it's a giant, noisy conference. And look, we don't have any relationships with the RSA Conference, so we don't have any poll or anything like that where, we'll have a spot that we can sit down and record. So I don't see any value in going there and trying to be part of it without that, to be honest with you. It's too busy. The expo hall is just a madhouse. It's huge. It's 2 expo halls connected by the underground tunnel in the Moscone Center. It's great, I think, to go and just sort of walk around the business hall and just see what's out there and see who's got what products and sort of what problems are being addressed. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's not welcoming, if that makes sense.
So the reason I brought this up and put you on the spot was I want to get feedback from people. So in the comments, if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're not and you want to go out to the YouTube, put comments there. Let us know if we should go or if you agree with Jeff that it's fodder. Or hit us up on LinkedIn after this episode goes live. Comment on the LinkedIn post.
It's just an expensive location too. San Francisco is crazy expensive for hotels, and I just don't see the value in it, especially when our niche is identity specifically. Could we do something there? Yeah, absolutely. But without having a specific space to record from, I just feel like it would just be kind of just walking around and.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. But I just feel like, identity is at the center of cybersecurity, and that is the biggest cybersecurity conference that I know of. But biggest doesn't mean the best, especially when it comes to conferences, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, we have, our niche, right, is identity security, digital identity and access management, whatever we're calling this, industry now. RSA is a great conference. I've been to it several times. I can't remember the last time I actually went to a session though. My pro tip is if you're interested in going, just get a business hall pass. They used to be cheap, $50. I don't know what they are now. But between, prices of hotels and airfare, especially coming from the East Coast, I just saw more value in walking around the expo hall and just seeing what products are out there.
Yeah. It's like the CES version of cybersecurity.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, yeah, the CES of cybersecurity. That might not be great. Maybe that's not the analogy they want, but I think it fits.
Yeah. But as far as conferences for us this year, we are going to EIC in May. We're going to Identiverse in June. I expect we're also going to Authenticate in October, but obviously we don't have all that worked out yet. But I did want to mention, I saw an email come out today that March 31st is the deadline for a call for speakers. So if you have a story to tell at Authenticate, make sure that you're cognizant of that date. It looks like the conference is going to be back at the Omni La Casa in Carlsbad, California. Bring all that up because it's one of my favorite conferences of the year. It's definitely not the biggest one, but how many conferences do you go to and it's at a killer resort?
Killer Resort's nice, but it's actually just a good conference of good people. So that's more of the draw for me. I mean, I don't spend much time in the room anyway, so it really doesn't kind of matter. But we have to go back to Authenticate. We cannot leave FIDO Feud round 2 unresolved like we did last year. And so, my expectation is that we'll be back in October and, round 3, you versus Megan. but we still need to talk with Megan and Adrian and Andrew and others to get things figured out. But my hope is that we'll be back and we can finally get some resolution to last year, which was a tie, which should not happen in a game like that.
So today we've got a mailbag, and I kind of feel like these mailbags come up and we do them when we have an opening on the schedule, or sometimes we plan some openings. The questions back up. So we get a lot more questions than we're able to go through today. We're going to try and get through, I think, like 8 of them. But to those who have sent questions, we haven't gotten to them yet. Please don't take it personally. It's just, we get overwhelmed with this sometimes.
It's a lot. And I try to answer ones, and I think we and I both do answer quick answers where we can, but sometimes the answers or the questions are really good. It's like, yeah, you know what? Let's either also address it here, or, hey, you know what? That's a great one. Keep listening. We're going to do a mailbag episode in a few days, weeks, months, whatever that looks like, and, try to get to in there. Obviously, if it's something urgent, put urgent, I think, in your LinkedIn message, and we'll try to respond a little bit quicker. But for the most part, yeah, these have been queuing up for a little while. And we've got a global mailbag. We've got 8 that we want to get to, plus a few lighter note ones from listeners, which are always fun. So I'm just going to kind of kick things off. We're trying to keep an eye on the clock. We try to stay around, 45 minutes to an hour, somewhere in that area. So if we start to get long-winded, I might give you the signal like, come on, pick it up. Let's go. And the same goes for you. If I'm getting long-winded, do the same thing, because we certainly like to talk. But let's get into it. Let's see. First up, we've got Hans from Munich, Germany. Of course, AI at the center at .com. Go to that URL, brings you here. With AI tools becoming a regular part of how we work, how are identity teams thinking about governing access for AI versus access for humans? Does the same thinking apply, or does it require a completely different approach? Jim, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, agentic AI is probably the thing most people are focused on. It's organization. Within the organization, if you put the tools in end users' hands and they are semi-technical, they start building agents, and you have to control the access. To control the login, you have to control the creation of accounts, because you don't want people just stuffing their own personal account in. I think the question also makes me think about, what we're doing now versus what we're going to have to do in the future. I think there's going to be a lot more of AI agents that are doing things in the environment versus human beings doing those things. And maybe it's not because the people start going away. Maybe it's just because the multiplication of agents becomes so great, and you have this workforce that's working 24 hours a day. I also think, though, that what we should be thinking about is that the threat actors also have AI, and that they're spinning up agents to basically find their way into your organization, find little holes, and breach your organization. And so you have to think about it as not some super hacker on the other end typing lines of code. It's 24/7, 365 agents looking for their way in. I think, there's no sure silver bullet that's going to solve all this. But what I think you can do is look for the easy entry points, right? You need to be searching your environment. ISPM is kind of the solution du jour to identify holes in your identity infrastructure that could be penetrated. And I think also, after you potentially are penetrated, do you have the tools in place that can spot, identify that you have been breached, and take evasive action? And all this has to take place in, milliseconds or seconds. You can't like send a report and send it to a human being to act on. That's way too slow for where we're at. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to take it up a higher level and just focus sort of on the macro world of governance. And, human identity is built around, I think, this assumption of accountability. So there's a person behind this access, and we know who that person is. An AI tool, blends that a little bit, maybe blurs a little bit, where it could be a human still behind the non-human access or the AI tool. It could be an API, it could be a bunch of things. But I think still the same foundational principles still apply. It's still, least privilege, maybe zero standing privilege. It's still, is the access appropriate for whatever it is the thing is trying to do? How often do you review the permissions on those accounts? Very similar to what we would do for humans. I think you hit the one thing for me is the scale of it and the speed of it is the other thing. Is this cannot be, we review our accounts every month or quarter or year. I think, when we're talking about AI tools, and I'll lump in anything non-human around that. So agentic service accounts, anything that's just not a human behind the access, is speed matters. And so how are you governing those philosophically to make sure that you can keep up with not only the speed, but also the scale? You might spawn 100, 1,000 different agents. By the time we get into this a little more mature over the next couple of years, we'll probably be dangling each of us, a few hundred non-human identities that are doing things on our behalf for us in anticipation of things that we need, right? Things like that. But the behavior is still much closer to a human account than it is to just an API, which is just the same transaction over and over again. Those will still need to be out there, but I think managing that life cycle will be very important. So it'll be interesting to see, how does IGA, for example, get involved with this? Can IGA keep up with millisecond speed lifecycle needs? Or is that a different platform? You mentioned ISPM. There's also IVIP, right? Visibility. I think there's a bunch of these things, and it wouldn't surprise me that we come up with new acronyms for new products or products maybe that blend a couple different areas. But I think it still comes down to, do you know who has access to what? With an extension of, do you know not just who has access to what, do you know what has access to what? Or what has access to who? So I think it just, it's going to be a very similar governance framework, I think. But the speed and scale are going to really be the trouble spots for people to think about.
Yeah, no, I think you made a great
no
point.
notes. All right.
So, no, I'm not going to argue with anything you said. So let's keep going so that we can get through as many of these as is possible.
Okay. Do you want to read the next one, or you want me to read it off?
Why don't you read all the questions and then we'll take turns going first on answering.
Okay. Yeah, I forgot we decided I would read them all. All right. Let's go with Gabriela. Where is she from? Sao Paulo, Brazil. We keep hearing that passwords are going away, but they are still very much a reality in our organization. What is a realistic first step for companies that want to start moving toward passwordless without disrupting everything at once? I'm going to interject here, and I want your thoughts on this too, but I don't think the first step is to replace passwords everywhere. This is very much a point solution. It's a arrow in your quiver of things that you can pull out and use, but I don't think we're at the state where it makes sense for the most people, most of the time, just say, hey, we're getting rid of passwords. I think you trial it, maybe a new application, maybe a specific application, but I don't think you focus on trying to do it all at once. Start small, start where it makes sense, and then look to expand from there. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a lot of what I wanted to say, but I did want to start with, there's two different scenarios. So there's passwords for your customers, there's passwords for your enterprise. I think for your customers, the answer is like, how quickly can you get passkeys in place? I mean, that's like it's becoming a ubiquitous solution, and it's a way to transition away from the password and create a good user experience that's more secure than traditional passwords, even passwords plus MFA.
But I think even in that scenario, Jim, it's another option still for customers, because not every customer might trust passkeys yet, because it's still relatively new. They hear this thing, it's like, oh, what is this? It sounds secure, everybody's doing it. So I haven't seen any companies yet that are passkey only. I think what I've seen more often than not is people are being asked to enroll a passkey at the same time they're doing a new account creation or password, but they still have a password. I imagine at some point they'll probably shut that off, but I don't know if it's necessarily like binary still, even on the customer side. At least not from what I've seen.
Right.
And I'm happy to be wrong. If somebody out there is like, yeah, here we're doing it and it's 100% and it's great, hit Jim and I up on LinkedIn, because I'd love to hear more about the use case.
Yeah, I mean, actually, so Denise was running through a scenario. I think it was with Amazon the other day. And so she has her account. I have my account. I'm paying for Prime. She's paying for Prime. We don't need that anymore.
Twice the prime.
So she went in as like, do you want to create a passkey? And she was like, no, I just want to like shut my account down. So I'm sure most companies don't really care about that use case where people want to shut their account down. But I agree with you. It's not black or white. Um, on the enterprise scenario, you potentially have um, hundreds of different identity silos. But I think what you ought to look at is trying to go passwordless on your biggest identity provider. So your Microsoft Azure, your Okta, whatever kind of IDP you have in place. Like that's where you're going to get the biggest gains from replacing passwords with some kind of hardware factor, some kind of other authenticator tool, even like a what do they call it within the Windows platform?
Or what? Passwords?
For
For that?
passwordless, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Windows Hello.
Yeah, Windows Hello. So what I was going to say is like I think focus on the solutions where you get the biggest bang for your buck, but they also have kind of come up with a solution for passwordless, right? So it's not like you have to reinvent the wheel. Then I think the focus ought to be move more of your enterprise platforms to use those for authentication rather than trying to come up with a passwordless solution for each one of your standalone solutions. That may not always be possible. You may need to look at it a different way, but I think that's a general approach that I would recommend. What do you think?
And I'm going to get on a soapbox here because I think most people that listen to the show are probably aware of the website SSO, I think .tax, that shames companies that are still charging for like SSO functionality as an extra. Like, no, man, if you're listening, you're one of those companies, that should be standard. Like that is better security for everybody, including the company themselves that's selling this stuff. So yes, get onto a single, SSO as much as you can. Beef up your IDP, make it strong, make passkeys an option there. And then I think over time, you probably run some sort of, campaigns to communicate and really truly start to kill off the password. I think there'll be some interesting things coming out of Authenticate this year we talked about earlier, but they put some announcements out recently about passkey portability and being able to transfer passkeys from one wallet to another, which I think is huge. You're not locked in as much as you were before, and then even as much as you were before that, where you were, well, I have a Windows passkey. Well, now I need a Mac OS passkey, and now I need a Google passkey. Now you've got password wallets that are going to sync all of that together, but there isn't really a standard yet. But I think it's either final or about to be final. The first spec of being able to transfer. So, okay, well, I use the LastPass wallet, but now I want to use Bitwarden or KeyPass or something else, right? As these wallets start to standardize and integrate that, that'll make it easier from a consumer standpoint to choose the wallet that you already like and be able to move things around as needed. So I think that's where I would start too.
Yeah.
All right, let's see who's next. Wei from Singapore. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Identity programs seem to mean different things depending on who you talk to. How do you define what a mature identity program actually looks like? And how do you know when you are getting there? What do you think?
So a couple of factors. I think, when I think of mature, I think of use frameworks to guide your decisions. You use methodologies like project management methodology. You don't just wing it. You have KPIs and other quantitative ways to measure the success of your program. But I also think, so that's kind of like running a formal program, and that will get you a tick mark on a lot of the traditional ways to measure how mature is your program. I think there's also two other factors I want to talk about. One is adaptability. What's happening in this environment or in this industry is happening so quick. It's not just this industry, it's in technology in general, with AI really kind of being the buzzword, and not just a buzzword. I mean, I almost hate calling AI a buzzword because even though it gets used as a buzzword, it is a ground shift. It's much more of a ground shift, I think, than cloud was. I actually could see in the future people bringing their infrastructure back on-prem. I know that's going to drive some people crazy, but I could see organizations doing that in the not too distant future. I think you have to be adaptive to these things that are changing. I think we've always thought about identity as IGA, access management, privileged access management. Now it's so much more. It's all those areas we talked about earlier, ITDR, ISPM, IVIP. All these things are also very important. It's because the boundary of what was identity is becoming bigger. The attack surface is changing, and we need to, as identity program leads, we need to adapt. We need to say, okay, this is the space of identity now. We have to take on more. I think along with taking on more is bring your leadership along so that they understand why you have to take on more and why you need a bigger budget, etc. The other thing is just, I think a mature environment is highly automated. So if you find yourself in the case where you're having humans do a lot of things that could be automated away, that is a sign of you're not running a very mature IAM program. So those are my thoughts.
I'm going to slightly disagree with the last part around automation, with the distinction of you can have a very mature program, but if you have a very small organization, maybe under 100, maybe automation still isn't there yet from a value perspective, right? Or prospect to be able to get the return on investment. You can still be mature and not be automated, but I do agree at some point you outgrow being able to be mature consistently from a governance standpoint without tools. But tools do not mean that you are mature from a governance or from a program standpoint. So I think about it from like a mature identity program is not about the most identity tools. It's consistent, it's reliable, it's auditable, it's processes that are well documented, standards are in place, policies are in place, and the business trusts it. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's automated, though, in my mind. At least not until you hit a certain point. I think you need to be able to answer, the basic questions. Do you know who has access to what? Or again, do you know who or what has access to who or what? And that will help determine, how mature you are in certain areas. From a program perspective, I think at more of the people and governance standpoint, who owns identity for the organization? Like if that person isn't identified, then you've got problems. You're not a mature organization. Jim, hey, you and I do workshops like this all the time in our day jobs. And, one of the first questions I always ask is, all right, so who owns identity? And you get a bunch of different answers. You might get one person raises their hand and everyone agrees, yes, Jim, you are the owner of identity. Another
because
scenario.
You raised your hand.
Right, because you raise your hand. The other one could be, Jim, you raise your hand because you think you own it. Someone else in the room raises their hand and another other person. Now you've got multiple owners of identity, or you have Jim raising your hand. Everyone's pointing at Jim, but you're raising your hand at someone else. Or no one raises their hand because no one is identity. So I think from a maturity standpoint, if I think about this from a program level, less about technology and more of how do you run an efficient program, there are some foundational questions to ask. Who owns identity? Do they know about it? And then what are the roles and responsibilities of the IAM program? Because a lot of people think they own identity and that they are the A in the RACI chart, and they are not. They might be an R, in a certain area or a certain capability or certain delivery, but there needs to be a discussion internally to make sure everyone's on the same page.
I'm going to push back on the automation because one of the lines that you like a lot is punching above their weight.
Hmm.
So to me, punching above your weight as an identity program means, let's just throw some numbers at this. 100-person organization. How big's your identity department going to be? One person part-time, probably. Or say you have 10,000 people and you have an identity department of 10 people. I don't know. How do you force multiply what you can get done as a program without technology? if you can get technology to, answer help desk calls or do tickets in a better way, all the things that you have to stand up, do single sign-on. Maybe, remember we had the CEO of Redblock on one of our earlier podcasts, and he talked about, their focus of using recorded videos of how to provision and then teaching and creating connectors for provisioning. Like, that's a force multiplier. That's how you get more done using technology. And that's why I think automation is such a foundational aspect to maturity, is that you can punch above your weight.
I think the force multiplier makes sense, but if you're never going to grow beyond 100 people, there's no reason to multiply that force for an automation use case. Could you be more efficient? Yes, but you can still be a very mature organization with a small amount of people and even smaller amount of people making sure that things are getting done the right way. But again, I guess I somewhat agree that at some point you will outgrow manual effort. You're still brute forcing it with hands-on keyboards and humans doing things. At some point, if the organization is of a growth mindset, meaning headcount will grow, and the number is almost irrelevant. Maybe it's 100, maybe it's 1,000, maybe it's 50. Kind of depends on the industry you're in as well and what your regulatory requirements are that you need to be able to demonstrate. But at some point, you do need automation, but I don't think it's the first thing that you look at from a maturity standpoint.
I think this is where AI becomes the game changer, right? If you're that 100-person organization, like I said, your IT department is probably only a handful of people. And how can you do access management? How can you do IGA, privilege access management, all the other things that you should be doing, whether you have 100 people or 10,000 people? If you got, valuable PII or other data, it needs to be properly protected. How can you do that with such a small number of people if you don't have a way to automate? And what I'm thinking when I said AI is just have agents that become your identity team.
I mean, it's an option for sure. But if I think about it, I'm gonna go back to it again. It's a 100-person organization. The changeover in permissions probably isn't taking place very often. You're not hiring as much because your onboarding is still around 100. You may not be doing that much onboarding. You might not be doing offboarding because it's a very stable organization, so the volume isn't there for that. People might shift around roles, and that's probably, if I'm an ID admin, that's probably where I'm spending more of my time is, Jim taking on this new project and needing access to this other thing, wearing two hats, right? Those sorts of things. But if I still have policies and standards in place and people are adhering to the policies and standards, the volume of work associated with a 100-person organization, I think is still manageable with maybe somewhere between 3 and 5 people doing IAM things, kind of as a very broad generalization. But if you grow, or if you expect that headcount to grow or terminate a bunch of people, right? Yes, automation is definitely going to help. Most organizations are looking to grow, but I think there is a handful that are like, yeah, we are like, Jim, you and I are a perfect example. We are a 2-person podcast. That number has not changed in 6 years. Now we have a bookkeeper, and now we have another member of our board for the nonprofit. So technically, we're 4 people, but we are not a headcount growth organization, right? If that makes sense.
We are very much using AI,
but not for permissioning.
Using technology. We're using technology. We're so much more mature, not just because we have better cameras and better microphones, but the editing that you do, the notions that we use to kind of shape up shows and prepare. It's like we wouldn't be able to do the volume of shows that we're doing for the last 7 years if we hadn't grown technology-wise. But this is why we started the podcast, right? We're going to get stuck on this question because we could go all day.
I don't want to let it go.
Yeah, you don't want to let it go. I'm good with letting it go.
Okay.
But this is why we started it, right? Because we have these awesome conversations, and they usually would end in a stalemate, right? And then we'd say a couple of days later, like,
Jim, I have to win.
I'm going to go back to Jeff. I got a zinger. I got this debate solved.
Mm-hmm. I will
And
just
so-
say that you mentioned AI tools, not the identity and access management of those tools. That's a different beast.
Okay.
So yes, we use AI tools, but we don't use any AI for identity and access management. We just don't. We don't need it. We're too small. And it doesn't matter. Like we're good. All right. And that gives me the last word. So let's move on to the next question. Let's go to Marcus from Toronto, Canada. Our security team and our IT team both think they own identity. How have you seen organizations successfully sort out who is responsible for what? And does it even matter as long as the work gets done? So I didn't even think about this question when we were answering the first one and having different roles and responsibility. I think that is the question. And I actually just had a conversation about this in my day job. I think it was actually earlier today. You need to sit down and talk as a group and say, okay, who is really the A here? Is there a difference between program ownership versus product ownership versus infrastructure versus, delivery of services, plan, build, run, whatever you want that to look like. But I think the most important thing is get in a room or get online and hash it out, figure it out, set up clear roles and responsibilities. What I have seen in the past is security tends to own the IAM program, but they may not be the entire delivery of the IAM program's capabilities. So they might be responsible for architecture, policies, standards, maybe setting the strategy and the direction, but there might be an IT group inside of an organization that is responsible for standing things up like Active Directory, Entra, Okta, IGA, PAM, right? Well, all the different products, and IT security might be a customer of those services. And then you get into the run side of things, operations. That could be the help desk, which typically is IT. One organization that I worked for a long time is we were fully 100% plan, build, run was all in IT security for IAM. Like that was my first kind of real major role. And we did everything. We were a call center for identity. We built and ran the tools for identity. And we also set the vision and the architecture for it and the strategy. So I think that's a little bit of a dying breed. So I think I see more of the shared model. But my advice would be just talk. Get in a room and talk and figure it out and make sure it's clear what are the roles and responsibilities and try to get to one A, but as few A's accountable in that RACI matrix as possible. That'll make life a lot easier for you going down the road.
I think Marcus makes a good point. He kind of lays out the issue and then he says, does it even matter? And it's a good point, right? Does it matter? If everything's getting done and there are no problems, then maybe it doesn't matter. Where this seems to crop up the most is that there are things that go wrong, and then it comes a matter of like, whose responsibility is it at certain points in the plan, build, and run life cycle of projects or of doing identity, if you will. I've always felt that identity belonged to information security, but I'm also willing to state that scenario creates a conflict of interest because in other types of technology, so ERP or CRM or anything outside of identity or outside of security, you have information security playing a role, which is kind of the watchdog role to make sure that security boundaries are being adhered to, security policies and standards are being adhered to. When you're talking about informational security projects, like identity would be in kind of that scenario that I recommended, you wind up not having that watchdog. You're watching yourself. You are information security. So who's making sure that you're following information security policies? Well, you are. And that puts your leadership in a tough position where they might have to either miss a go live date or let things slide on an information security policy basis, right? So it's kind of a philosophical separation of duties kind of thing. I still think it's the right place to put it because that's a lot of times where the expertise lies. 20 years ago, it might have been different where I think IT is in general, it was kind of more of a user experience with identity. Nowadays, I think it's more identity security. And so it belongs in information security, in my opinion. It's generally the right answer. But if it's not there and you're talking about moving it there, then I think that you have to make the case. But I think for most organizations that I work with anyway, there's under the umbrella of the information security office led by the CISO is where identity sits on that. It's usually proper.
Yeah, I think so from the program side. I don't necessarily care where the infrastructure is getting built for identity as long as it's getting built and it's following policy.
I mean, that's the biggest thing with Microsoft Entra as a single sign-on platform, because are you going to say, oh, these certain people do access management and other people do everything else that Entra does? I've actually never, ever seen that. And I've worked with some pretty large organizations. There's no logical separation once you're in Entra. And there might be people who are specialists or things like that. But yeah, if you have a big AD environment, a big Entra environment, they're going to do access management.
And IT is probably going to own that, not IT security. But IT security is going to set the policies and standards. You bring up a point that makes me very nervous. If an organization cannot trust their IT security department to follow their own policies, you've got other problems. And that idea of watching the watchers, makes sense. But I think that's where your internal and external auditors come in as well, because they are typically not part of IT security. They might be part of a different risk function, or maybe just an audit function. That could be an option there. I also don't see very many large IT security organizations unless there has been a conscious decision to take in the technical work, which means building and running in 24/7 ops for all the IT things, which, again, you're almost standing up like a duplicative organization for security tools versus what IT already has in place. Again, I don't really care so much as long as the roles are defined, understood, and agreed upon.
Yeah. The only thing you said there that triggered me was that, well, if you're in charge of information security, you shouldn't need somebody to make sure you're following the policies. That's why separation of duties exists. Like, you shouldn't have to have accountants, split their duties, because why should they commit fraud? Well, unfortunately, people do.
Yeah, but let's be real. If IT security is responsible for all this, who is checking them? I think it's probably internal audit, followed up by an external audit, because you're not going to go and stand up another team to check the security team. Like, that doesn't make any sense. That's what auditors are for. So I just wow, what a terrible position to be in if you're the CEO and you don't trust your IT security team. Like, you got other problems, man. You got to figure that out.
Yeah, no, it's true. But you trust everyone, but it's like the whole trust but verify. If your first, second, and third line of defense for a reason, look, we work for the public accounting firm during the day. We get a steady helping of this stuff, and there's reasons those things exist. I will say this. So my experience with audit of IT process like that, it's very likely that you could say, heck, we didn't finish the scan with the level of precision that we expected to. Should we go live anyway? And someone says, yeah, just go live. We're going to make a executive gut decision, right? And that might not be up to snuff in terms of somebody auditing it, but it's very likely that never gets audited. That never ends up on anybody's dashboard.
Yeah, maybe not. I think the problem there is it's a little bit of a conspiracy theory type approach. Now you're starting to think, okay, how many people are going to keep quiet in the middle of this thing, especially when something goes wrong? Like, people will talk, right? The only way to keep a secret from two people is to kill the other person. Right, that's it.
Definitely time to move on to the next question.
Yeah. So on that note, first of all, don't kill anybody. We frown on that here on the Identity at the Center podcast. Just make sure roles and responsibilities are clear and everyone's operating on the same, guidelines. All right, let's get to, I think it's pronounced Linh from Hanoi, Vietnam. As somebody fairly new to the IAM space, what advice would you give for building credibility and influence when you are trying to get leadership to take identity security seriously. Welcome to the identity community, Lynn. Pleasure to have you here. Come to Identiverse, join ID Pro, commiserate and learn and celebrate with all our fellow identity people in any of those forums. But what's your advice for someone to build credibility influence when you're just kind of getting started in IAM?
I think the biggest thing, and probably Lynn is going to be able to do this already. Sometimes being too in the weeds makes this harder to do, but speak about identity, speak about security in business terms. How does it, increase value for the firm? How does it decrease risk? I think if you stick to that, that's the biggest way to be successful as a leader, a business leader, focused on identity. What do you think, Jeff?
Communication is such a huge part of it. If you can, translate, if you can take the specs from the engineers and deliver to the customer, or take the specs from the customer and deliver to the engineers, for all my office-based fans out there, that is a key skill that I don't think there's enough of. Being able to talk the language of business, and not just business, your business. Understand what your business terminology stands like. What is the translations that you need to make? What are the risks, the costs, the efficiencies, the things that you can tie directly back to say, hey, if we are doing this in identity, here's how we reduce this risk, or we improve this efficiency, or we enable this capability that our customers are going to love, right? Things like that. It takes time also. This is not something you just kind of do overnight. There's a lot to learn in identity. I think one of the first things you have to figure out is, what do you want to be when you grow up in identity? Are you a technical resource? Are you a non-technical resource? And then start to figure out, where your interests are and where you think you can add the most value to the organization, or wherever you want take your career. But definitely, lean into understanding your business and learning how identity impacts those business, and try to think of ways where it might not be as visible how identity is impacting the business. It might be hidden somewhere underneath something. IT and all the IAM heroes out there that are making these programs run are really good at hiding pain. And the organization sometimes doesn't feel pain that is there because it's getting hidden by that heroism by the organization. So try to identify those things, and I think you'll come a long way. And then just continue to build up the experience, network. Again, join ID Pro, idpro.org, stuff like that. And I think you'll be on your way. All right, let's move to Claire from London in the United Kingdom. We talk a lot about least privilege in theory, but enforcing it in practice feels like a constant battle against the business. How do you strike the right balance between security and not slowing people down? What do you think, Jim? Least privilege in practice.
It's a great observation. I mean, we've been chasing least privilege for the entire time that I've been in the industry. So I think the real key is focus on your highest risk applications and accounts. In other words, it's got to be a risk-based approach. So you put your focus on where you have your most risk. Applications that have, we use this term crown jewels to talk about the importance of accounts, but I think it's also the importance of applications or where you have your data. So it's the crown jewel data and your crown jewel accounts. Everything else can come after that. I also think from a technology or philosophical perspective, we should also be driving not only toward least privilege, but zero standing privilege.
I agree. I think it's harder than not to be able to move forward with zero standing privilege. I think you have to make a definition and make sure people are following the same definition. When you say least privilege, what does that mean? Because it's not a destination, it's a direction of travel. And so I think making sure that you're on the same page with what the organization desires, wants, needs is important. I think you bring the business into the conversation and help them understand what the differences are between least privilege, zero standing privilege, role-based access control, all those things are very different. The strategy might be least privilege, but we talk about the menu all the time, Jim. Like, who cares if anybody can see what's on the menu? Is that the bag I want to fight? No, you probably are more interested in like segregation of duties between accounts payable, receivable, or privilege access, within specific systems, whatever that looks like. So I think you start with that. You start the conversation, but I think you decide as an organization, what does least privilege mean, and understand is that it's not a destination. Again, it's a direction. We're going to move towards that, and then just start whittling away. I don't really like roles. I think they're too hard to maintain without tools and automation and AI at this point. I would start small, go maybe attribute-based access control, try to get good data from your sources of the truth and try to automate off of that sort of thing. But it's difficult without having conversations with the business to help them understand it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, everything we just said there. Let's
just
go
do
on
that.
to the next one.
It's easy. All right, we got a couple more. We're already at 48 minutes, so let's see how we do here. From Sydney, Australia, James says, access reviews feel like a checkbox exercise at most organizations that he's worked at. Is there a better way to think about them than that actually produces meaningful results rather than just satisfying an auditor? I couldn't agree more. I think for most organizations, it is a checkbox compliance thing that they've been told that they have to do because the auditor or the risk person or the security person said so. I think this is a great spot for AI to start looking at this type of permissions and maybe doing differentials instead of just recertifying everybody every 3 months or every year. Take a look at what's changed. Maybe that's going to make things a lot easier and get rid of some rubber stamps. What do you think?
I think you're right on. This is like the first question where I don't think we're disagreeing. Yeah, I've always felt like access reviews had limited value, that they were, we had Anthony Vigiano on. He called them security theater at one of the conferences. And I think that's usually true. I used to say they were a backstop for having suboptimal processes on the, on the front end. The solution is get rid of those suboptimal processes. I think one other thing we can do is like, look, if someone's not using their access, take the access away. I mean, that seems like a better process than to bug managers to review a couple hundred accounts, or a couple thousand different access profiles and stuff like that. It's just very little very little juice for the squeeze.
Yeah. Yeah, let's just leave that one there. I don't I think that one is somewhat straightforward, but in reality, I think you just have to have conversations with the right people to make sure
Can I
that
just
it's
throw one
actually
more
making
thing
sense.
in?
Of course.
Obviously, if you're being told that you need to do it from an audit perspective and you can't convince folks otherwise, then you have to do it, and voids everything we just said.
Well, there are certain requirements. You have to do it. I think, I like to argue with auditors around why are we doing things. If I have a better way to do it from either a capability or a process standpoint that still meets the spirit of what they are trying to get to, auditors, in my experience, don't necessarily care how you're doing it. It's what you're able to demonstrate. And so if you can demonstrate that access is appropriate, the need for an access review, maybe goes down or is lessened. And, maybe there are different ways you can look at it. So I would say don't be afraid to innovate in your organization and question and challenge the intent behind the audit and see if there's a better way to do it. Okay, last one here from Chicago, Illinois. Go Blackhawks. Darnell, how do you make the case to a CFO or a CEO for investing more in identity security when there has not been a breach yet? What language tends to actually land with executive leadership? Jim, why should we spend money on identity security if everything seems to be working fine?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One is you want to avoid FUD. But I think one of the most effective ways is to tell real world stories, especially if you can use direct competitors to say, hey, this organization got breached because of these things. These are the investments that we need to be making. I also believe there is kind of a truth to you just don't want to be the slowest. But when you're getting into the hyperspeed of these attacks and AI agent swarms that are trying to scan your company to get in, I think it's not just being the slowest wildebeest anymore. It's like being in the top 50% or in the bottom 50%. You're still vulnerable. I think that's how you make the case is like real world examples and let them ask questions, really understand like how did these breaches take place and what was the impact on their business. Get people to accept the risk too. I think there's nothing more effective than saying like, look, I'm in charge of the identity program. I've identified a number of risks within the organization. Somebody's got to own those risks. I'm talking about the risks. Somebody's got to own them, and it can't be me.
I think that's great advice. Get somebody to own and document their ownership or acceptance of that risk is fantastic. That's a little bit of Game of Thrones, maybe, in some organizations trying to get it done. But I agree with everything you said. Don't talk. I don't think you talk technical. I think you talk in outcomes. I think you try to align things with the business and the risk that they might be thinking about. I think you keep using agentic identity swarms. You've used that for like the last few episodes. I think it's apropos because now you definitely want to be the slowest, but when you have swarms of things that are attacking not you, but everybody, that just means there's more opportunities for slower people, to get gobbled up by that swarm. So there's probably, some justification there to be taught, to be talked about. I think you also need to prove, can you deliver? So I think there's a lot of people out there that know they should be spending more money on identity security, but maybe they haven't been successful in delivering projects in the past. They need to figure out how they're going to solve that part of it too. If Jim, you're unreliable and you don't seem to get anything done, why would I give you money to do anything? Not that you are.
Thanks for clarifying that.
There's a pause there, so I could just cut right there.
Have you heard of 11 Labs?
Yes, of course.
Is that what you use for the April Fool's episodes? Okay. So 11 Labs does a lot of AI voice generation. And one that I heard the other day was just like, what? I mean,
it's getting better. I'm already starting to think about our April Fool's episode for this year.
What's going to be like in 2029 when you have AI swarms calling people's help desks, trying to socially engineer them? When people are getting socially engineered as recently as last year.
Well, the answer is very simple, Jim. I have the answer. It's called AI. AI is going to defend us against the other AI, and everything's going to be good. So the AI swarms are going to call into AI agents, and they're going to bicker and fight, and everyone's going to be happy.
That's probably what's going to happen.
All right, let's wrap up on a lighter note. We've got a few here. Let's see how many we can get through. Maybe we'll try to keep these somewhat brief. But let's start with Portland, Oregon, and Tyler. If IAM was a sport, what position would you each play and why? Jim, what position would you play? And I guess the position will tell me the sport, but what do you pick that position?
So it would have to be baseball. Jeff, do you like baseball?
No, I think it's boring.
Yeah, I have no time for you.
And that was our first and last conversation ever. Literally, that's how we met. Jeff, do you like baseball? Not really. Okay. He turned around and walked away from me. All right. Nice to meet you, Jim.
Nice to meet you. Oh, potential client. I don't care. So did you know even that baseball has started? Like
I know
training?
Pitchers and catchers have reported, yes.
No, the games are going.
Games are going already?
Yeah.
It's February.
Going since the weekend.
Oh,
I know.
okay.
They moved everything up a couple of years ago. Anyway, I'd pick
All right, you just blew
baseball.
my mind. I didn't realize the season had actually started. Is that what you're saying? The MLB season in the US has started?
The MLB spring training season has
Oh,
started.
spring training. Okay, yeah. So we're still in preseason
Yeah.
stuff. Okay.
And then World Baseball Classic is this year.
Okay.
I know I'm educating you on this.
Look, I'm not kept up with baseball at all because I don't care. But when you said the season had started, I was like, what? Like, that's like, you blew my mind there for a second.
Yeah. I guess I just assume that everybody cares. I'd pick baseball because I'm me. And in my earlier days, I would have picked shortstop. I remember Victor Barris used to always say, Jim, you're my star shortstop, which is like the hardest position on the field. But I'm a much older man now. And I probably would pick like right field or left field where you don't have to be so fleet of foot.
What about first base? Scoop grounders? You don't have to be very mobile either.
Yeah. Or first base. Actually, I would like first base, but
see, I know baseball.
Like, at the major league level, no, because the balls get hit really hard. You don't want to get hit in the face of the ball.
Oh, I don't think anybody does. I don't think it's anyone's intention. What position? I thought about this a little bit, and I don't think at this point in my career that I would be a player. I would be a coach. So I would either be a head coach, maybe in the NFL, or maybe I would be the Phil Jackson and, the head coach of the Chicago Bulls with a bunch of star players instead of coordinating and strategizing and things like that. I think that's just where I'm at right now from like where I am in identity career is more of, the coach kind of pulling the strings and strategizing and kind of making sure everything's running the same way. Does that count?
The worst position to play would be kicker.
Worst position?
The worst.
Why? Why would it be the worst?
Let's say you move the ball, you positioned it, 20-yard field goal. All you do is kick through, we win or tie, and you miss.
Okay. And what if you make it? What if you're rock solid and you make all your field goals?
Nobody cares. Everybody expected you to make it. Problem is when you miss the kick. Like there's a poor guy from, I'm not going to name the college because he might be a listener or something, or his dad might be a listener. Who knows? Right. But they didn't win their conference championship basically because this kid missed a field goal that was a layup. And man, that's the worst.
I mean, yes.
Being like the one guy who's like your fault. And it's almost like you want to make the case like, no, it shouldn't have come down to that. But still, we know it's your fault.
You missed your play, but there were multiple plays leading up to that led to that outcome. So I think in the sport like football, it's so much more than just the last kick. Yes, it's immediate. You dump on the kicker for missing the field goal. It happens. But there's just as many people who are making those field goals in those moments. This NFL season that we just had a bunch of last-second field goals to win games. And, they're exciting when they happen. It's non-contact, for the most part if you're a kicker. So, you're probably going to have a little bit longer career. So there's upsides to being a kicker.
There is upsides.
What if you're the batter and you strike out? You're a designated hitter. Your entire job is to hit the ball and you miss.
Yeah, but that happens. Like people strike out a lot. And I don't know. It's also, there are moments. Every sport has moments where it's like, you need to come through or we lose. You could be on the foul stripe in basketball, or you could basically be the kicker in football. I do have a question, though, for you about football. So it used to be that a long kick was 50 yards, right? What's a long kick now? Like 60, 65 yards.
Yeah. I mean, 50 is still a long kick, but kicker legs have gotten so strong. The record was set this past year, 68-yard field goal by, I think it's Cam Little in Jacksonville. A 68-yard field goal.
Squats or something? Or what's the difference?
I mean, we've joked, I would say a lot of people have joked about kickoffs for the last several seasons before they did the kickoff rule change over the last couple of years. But, you'd see kickers kicking off from the 30-yard line, kicking them through the uprights, on a kickoff after a score. So it doesn't surprise me. I think it's an interesting strategy. It's almost like, I was talking about this with another friend of mine. It's almost like if you have a kicker that can consistently kick 65-yard plus field goals with high degree of accuracy. It's very similar to the tush push that Philly runs all the time when they are, if they get down to, let's call it 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, they almost always go for 2 tush pushes and get the first down because they can consistently get 1 or 2 yards on that, play. And nobody has really been able to figure out how to stop them consistently. So if you have, I think it changes the dynamic of the game with these long ball kickers. Wouldn't surprise me that we see 70 in the next couple of years because I think, these kickers just have big legs and it's crazy.
Absolutely. Do we have time for another one?
Yeah, let's do this one from Matt from Denver, Colorado. What does your non-work life think you actually do all day? Does anyone in your family actually understand your job? Jim.
So absolutely not. So I actually looked up something because it's like, what if I were to say I'm a cytopathologist? People say they would have no idea what I do. That's pretty much what it's like saying you're a cyber security consultant. And I usually leave it at that high level. People just know, cybersecurity is important. Now, if you get to talking to somebody who's in IT or, somewhat reasonably connected, then it's a different conversation. But if it's a person at a store or, like somebody who's there doing
cutting your hair, you're in the barber chair,
cutting your hair.
That's my favorite.
Cyber security consultant. That's like, you must make a lot of money and you got into the right field at the right time. And let's talk about something else. Cytopathologist.
Well, you're looking at cells and I think cancer research and things like that. But yeah, most people don't know that.
Did you look that up on AI right after I said it? Or did you figure it out?
You don't even know if you're talking to real me or AI me. So who knows?
True. I could be totally confused. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think some people have an idea. I've been married to my darling wife for over 20 years now. And I think she's kind of gets it at this point. I've been doing it for about 20 years. So I think you and I are in a little bit of a unique position because by day we are identity consultants, but a lot of people think we do this podcast at night as our full job. It's actually our night and weekend job. But I think most people just know that I'm a security consultant and they just think hackers and, that's it. And that's fine. I generally won't get into the specifics unless they start digging into it or are interested in learning more. Security consultant. Sit in the barber chair. Hey, what do you do? Oh, I do consulting. What do you do? Security consulting. Oh, like for buildings? No, more for information security. Oh, okay. Like hackers and passwords. And then I'm like, oh, okay. And then their eyes glaze over and they're like, not interested anymore.
Yeah. I remember I just told my dad, I'm like, I do computers. I was like, okay. Well, he's like, okay, I don't know computers, so good enough.
Yep.
Does computers. Jimmy does computers.
Jimmy does computers. I don't think we can top Jimmy does computers, so we're going to end it there. Thank you so much to everyone who sent in questions. Keep them coming. Hit us up on LinkedIn. We try to answer as many as possible. For the ones we don't answer right away, we generally will throw them into our Notion notebook here and try to pick out the best ones or ones that we think are relevant, try to keep up things. But I definitely appreciate people taking the time to reach out. So you can do that on LinkedIn. You can send us a contact form on our website, idacpodcast.com. You can comment below with whatever player you're in. I think they all pretty much have comments at this point. And you can like and subscribe. That also helps us. So we'll go ahead and leave it there for this week and talk with everybody in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.